survival. What we see as a coral structure is actually hundreds to thousands of tiny individual organisms called coral polyps living together in a colony. Each soft-bodied polyp secretes a hard outer skeleton of calcium carbonate that attaches either to rock or the dead skeletons of other polyps. But the polyps live not only with each other, but also with algae that lives inside the coral's tissues. Like other plants, algae use photosynthesis to produce nutrients and pass many directly to the coral's cells. In return, the coral provides a safe home for the algae. So coral formation is one of the natural world's perfect symbiotic relationships. But nature takes it even one step further. By itself, the coral skeleton is ghostly white, but the chlorophyll in the algae gives them a green-brown color. And on top of that, the algae produce a variety of pigments, which finally give the coral formations their stunning hues. But when the algae becomes stressed, they stop providing enough nutrients to support the coral. And soon the starving coral expel the algae and turn back into their ghostly white, a condition called bleaching. If the situation continues long enough, the coral weaken and die. What can stress the algae to begin this chain of destruction? One thing is water temperatures that are too warm. And as climate change causes global temperatures to rise around the world, we are seeing coral bleaching in the ocean everywhere, including the largest system of coral structures in the world, Australia's Great Barrier Reef. This scientist is widely known as the godfather of coral, and he has identified more than 20% of all the world's coral species. Back in the 1990s, he started getting very worried as he began seeing changes in the climate. And back then, 30 years ago, he made some pretty scary predictions.
I predicted that by 2015, the carbon dioxide levels would be so high that it would cause bleaching practically every year. It's all happened, and the consequences of that have turned out to be much worse than those predictions. It's exactly like me seeing my family slowly die of something. It's very grave-like.
Corals are really the linchpin of the ecosystem. When you go out there and you say, in the ocean, how many species of fish live in and around coral reefs? The answer is about a quarter.
Yes, although coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, they provide a home for 25% of the ocean's species that we know of today. And in more human terms, 60% of the fish the world depends on for food depend on healthy coral for survival. But the value of coral to human beings goes even further. As one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth, there may be millions of undiscovered species of organisms living there. Many scientists believe that these reefs hold the key to finding new medicines for the 21st century. Medical researchers are now developing new drugs from coral reef animals and plants as possible cures for arthritis, viruses, cancer, and other diseases.
The other thing that is very important is coral is protecting us from the waves.
Coral reefs help prevent the loss of life, property damage, and erosion as they buffer shorelines against 97% of the energy from waves, storms, and floods.
If the coral is dying, then we won't have this protection against storm surge, especially in the area where we've got cyclones and huge storm surge is coming up from cyclones, so the coral reef can protect against this.
If this natural barrier was gone, millions of people who live on the ocean's shores would suffer. And from an economic standpoint, besides all the industries surrounding fishing, corals have great importance for another human activity that is extremely valuable to many countries.
Tourism, $5 to $6 billion worth of tourist revenue coming into our country because we have this pristine, beautiful structure.
If you see something you really love die, of course it has a huge impact. It's very hard to continue when so many people think, oh, there's nothing wrong. And that makes me angry because this is utter stupidity.
But corals are not just being damaged by rising temperatures. They are also being attacked by another problem, a major change in the actual chemistry of the ocean.
Ocean acidification, which we talk much less about, at least in the media.
It is yet another issue caused by the burning of fossil fuels. Like a sponge, the ocean soaks up the added carbon dioxide in the air.
We know that today the oceans pump about 1/2 of the excess carbon that humans are putting into the atmosphere, which means that they're already taking out of the atmosphere huge elements of carbon that would otherwise be heating the atmosphere even more.
But as that helps the atmosphere, it hurts the ocean. This added CO2 dissolves and becomes carbonic acid. As a result, seawater has become more acidic. A lot more. Acidity is 30% higher than before the Industrial Revolution. This inhibits the coral's ability to build its calcium carbonate skeleton. The effect is similar to osteoporosis, slowing growth and making corals weaker.
There's huge parts of the world where you can swim over a coral reef and you just see individual corals here and there. It really is decimated. At least 30% of all the coral of this planet is gone. If we continue business as usual, the only hope for a coral reef is that humans will destroy their own capacity to make carbon dioxide.
There is a real chance that ocean acidification, if it continues on the track that it is now, that coral-dominated reef systems like the Great Barrier Reef will soon disappear. And of course, if the reef disappears, then the habitat for over 1 million species will also disappear as well. At a global scale, losing coral reefs has implications for over 500 million people who depend on coral reefs each day for their food and income.
Coral reefs are saying we're in trouble. And when coral reefs are in trouble, then the oceans are in trouble.
Some scientists predict that all the world's corals could be wiped out by the middle of the century. But corals are not the only sea life being threatened by ocean acidification. Other sea creatures and plants are also in danger. The acidity of the ocean can disrupt the delicate natural balance between predator and prey populations. In many important ways, fish rely on their sense of smell. One scent in particular is essential for their survival.
The smell of chewed up fish. Yeah, the smell of chewed up fish.
This is the odor that fish would recognize if a predator was attacking their group.
This is the alarm cue. So this is if their sense of smell is working properly, then this is the smell that they should identify and want to run away from.
But in water of a higher acidity, the fish's ability to detect odors is disrupted.
And this is important because once they lose their sense of smell, they have an ability to detect and respond or avoid the predators, pick up chemical cues associated with finding food, or in the case of salmon, come to their natal streams.
But fish are not the only sea life affected by ocean acidification. It especially impacts any animals with a shell.
The ocean is so acidic that it is dissolving the shell of our baby oysters. Our farm is what has kept this family together. It's our glue, and it would be devastating to lose that such a big part of our history. What we're experiencing here in the Puget Sound is what other people will be experiencing not too long in the future.
While the damage caused by the acidification of the ocean may be most evident in coral and shellfish, there is a less visible but perhaps even more destructive problem.
There are also alarming signs that plankton, that is responsible for 50% of the oxygen we breathe, and for the vast food chains in our polar oceans, are beginning to struggle to make their delicate calcium carbonate skeletons.
Our study has found that phytoplankton levels have diminished by up to 40% over the last 50 years, so since 1950. Phytoplankton is important because it's the base of everything in the ocean, and the ocean is the base for everything on the planet.
If we start losing the plankton of the southern oceans, we start losing the capacity of the southern oceans to support just about all their marine life.
It can completely change ocean ecosystems, starting with the ocean microorganisms in the ocean surface waters, which are those that are actually pumping carbon from the atmosphere into the oceans through photosynthesis. If the oceans were to go beyond a certain level of acidity, Well, paradoxically, they could actually destroy some of these organisms that are actually helping us to keep carbon levels in the